The entry of Communist Party and the communist philosophy is more than a century old, and the communists right from 1920s played a decisive role, though Marxism was about class difference and the proletarian class overthrowing the other exploitative class like the landlord monopoly governments. The caste also played a very important role in the communist policies, and it was the communists who entered into the agricultural areas where there is a large scale scheduled caste discrimination was taking place. For example, in Tanjavur Delta areas where the scheduled castes were kept separately from the main village and used as agricultural laborers, and on top of this exploiting their work, they were also socially exploited. Large scale atrocities were there, and it was the communist leader Mr. Srinivas Rao who formed the first agriculture labor union in East Tanjavur, who also fought against the punishment given in the name of caste superiority. The punishment in the form of whipping, making the people to drink the cow dung milk, all that punishment, the first fight was started by the communists, and it also brought an end to a greater form of atrocities in Tanjavur. And it was the communists who were able to bring the atrocities against scheduled castes in a big way, and later Mahatma Gandhi's movement and to some extent the Congress party's effort to fight against untouchability, and added to that much later the Dravidian movement asking for caste equality were all contributory factors in which the lead role, if at all I can say, was taken by the communist movement first. And even today the agricultural laborers were largely comprising of scheduled castes were led by the Communist Party, and to some extent the untouchability and atrocities in the areas where the communists were able to mobilize the agricultural laborers was the main reason for the end of atrocities against scheduled castes. Is the Varnashrama, the caste system, where 4 castes are in a caste hierarchy and the scheduled caste is kept outside, called as the Avarnas. The Savarnas and Avarnas is a curse of the Hindu Sanatana system, by which people were divided on the basis of the caste ranking, the Brahmin being the top and Sudras being in the bottom, and even underneath the Sudras, the scheduled castes were kept below, and therefore certain systems which were evolved over centuries in the name of religion, in the name of Sanatana, got stratified. This one thing which sociologists for a long time could not comprehend, and even if they comprehend, they could not fight vigorously, and therefore in the Madras Presidency, which comprised of even North Malabar in the British days, the social evil fight started. One of the fight is against the caste discrimination and the untouchability practice, not only against scheduled castes, even some of the OBC communities like Nadars were kept outside the caste system, were treated as a polluted caste. So this pollution theory, which was cleverly evolved so that caste supremacy can be maintained by the Brahmins, was one of the major reasons to start a movement against caste hegemony. There are two principles that helped in this fight against caste system. One was the British introduced the English education, and irrespective of caste, the missionaries were teaching children of different castes the same education, contrary to the past practice where only Brahmins can learn, others cannot learn. Therefore, in the last 2 centuries, the education brought in by missionaries in the Madras Presidency, comprising of entire South India, this became a most important factor, that universal education. Universal education, I do not mean that everybody will get education, but everybody who aspire for education can go to school and later to college, and if some necessary go outside. For example, Ambedkar went to foreign countries to study in London and in America. So it is in that sense, education from the Western world was one of the factor. The second factor was anti-Brahmin movement, that the other communities refused to accept Brahmins in the caste hegemony and some of the rules, some of the Dharma, Sanatana, which is framed by them and called as a Manu code, Manu Dharma, was the major factor which was started at the movement. And therefore Tamil Nadu is no exception, and therefore Tamil Nadu became one of the pioneers in the fight against caste evils. And even you will find the temple entry in Vaikam and later in Madurai Meenakshi temple, and the first Congress government in 37 bringing a temple entry act, first in North Malabar in the Guruvayur temple, and later the entire Madras presidency, were all the starting point. Though temple involves certain religious belief, one section being kept outside the temple or the temple ritual were sought to be brought several dramatic changes in the caste system. The second was Mahatma Gandhi's movement against untouchability. He had an extensive tour of Tamil Nadu, Mysore, Malabar, and then it also had a different, and he started a Harijan Sevak Samaj, and it also drew people from other communities to work for the upliftment of the scheduled caste people. And finally, when the constitution came and Article 17 abolishing untouchability was written into it, it gave a gallop to a large-scale fight against caste discrimination. And Article 15 is a heart of the Indian Constitution, where all forms of discrimination, including caste, has been abolished by a constitutional requirement as a fundamental right. And therefore, Madras became one of the places where the social evils of caste became the first movement against caste atrocities and against caste discrimination. And the system of administration and justice was evolved by Manu, and the Manu code became the Manu Shastra, which is so-called nothing to do with any Shastra. It's a caste supremacy of the Brahmins, and they were able to impose several social conditions on the other communities. And therefore, when the judiciary was evolved by the British, the initial law practitioners were largely Brahmins, and also later when they were recruited as judges, they were also Brahmins. And slowly the legal profession was broad-based, and other community people were asked to were allowed to come and become successful lawyers. But so far as the composition of judiciary is concerned, still it was a preserve of the upper caste, including the Brahmins. And therefore the practices which is normal to them, the Sanatana, which is inherent in their quality, also started reflecting in various decision-making process. So there were atrocious judgments given in the earlier days before this awareness against caste came. Even today, even two years back, a judge from Madras High Court and a judge from the Kerala High Court attended a World Tamil Brahmin Conference. I wrote an article in the Tamil Hindu, are they all judges or caste leaders? If they want to be judges, they should cut off from their caste affiliation. And if they want to work for the caste, they should resign their post as a judge. Now, wittingly or unwittingly, consciously or unconsciously, the past practices, the communal tinge in their decision became very visible in their decision-making process. Even today, with the strong support of the RSS and their Hindutva ideology, there are many judges who start writing judgments in a manner which is completely against the spirit of the Constitution, which is contrary to the constitutional principle. If the Constitution talks about secularism, they write with Hindutva ideology, and if the Constitution talks about no religion, abolition of caste and untouchability, they write with caste pride and a caste improvement. And the only possible method by which this could be resisted is a public criticism against the conduct of judges, number one. Number two, a public review of the decisions which they are rendered, which are sanadana. There are even judges who speak about against reservation. There are judges who speak about bringing Bhagavad Gita as a national text. There are judges who speak about the misuse or the alleged misuse of the SC/ST Attractions Act. Therefore, we find there are judges who carry the old baggage of Manu Dharma and not the constitutional Dharma which has been written in a written constitution. Now, the fundamental fight will be whether they should still be a judge or go back to their own Sanadana way of living. Now, the important issue is not just to have enough lawyers from different communities, it also to have an ideological thrust for the lawyers to take up issues more based on the constitution rather than their caste principle. Now, this fight is a continuous fight. This fight is an eternal ideological fight, not only against judiciary, against all men in power. Judiciary is part of the power structure, and therefore the first fight, because they decide the rights of parties, is against sharpening criticism. Therefore, if a judge tomorrow decides matters not in terms of constitution, but against the tenets of the constitution, they write orders supporting a caste supremacy, they write orders supporting the existing irrelevant social structure, we should also have a public fight, because the question of impeaching such judges is a very difficult process. Therefore, at all levels, there must be a public vigil. Secondly, at the time of recruitment, like in America, every judge is questioned on his social philosophy, on his commitment to constitution, on his role in different issues that are likely to come to court. But we do not know any background of a judge when he is made as a judge of the High Court or a Supreme Court. Today, the recruitment process must be more transparent rather than keeping it as a secret. Number two, the judges themselves recruiting other judges to the institution is not found anywhere in the world, and as said by Rumapal, it becomes like a old boys association. If two old boys take the third old boy into the system, and there is no public scrutiny of the judges who are to be appointed, therefore we should evolve a system under which the judges are screened and are selected by a body other than judges, a body which is wedded to the constitution, a body which will screen people in the light of the constitutional spirit. That's the only way to fight against communalism in the judiciary.